to a Hope 1032 podcast.
I'm Colette Smart, and I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and your host on Raising Teens. I'm also a parent, and I'm in the middle of raising my own teens and young adult children. I know that raising teens can be fun and busy, but also terrifying and even lonely. I've experienced all of these emotions, sometimes in the same day. On this podcast, I'm joined by well-known experts, and we chat about some of the most common questions I get asked about raising teenagers in my own work, and even some questions I have myself. I have such hope for this generation of young people, so each episode is full of support and practical advice. I love seeing all your questions come in, so each season I focus on some that teachers, parents, and carers have raised. We're all caring for the teens we love so much, so please keep sending in your ideas and questions through my Instagram and Facebook page or via the Hope 1032 podcast webpage, so we can support this generation of teens together. I am so thrilled today to have the renowned Hugh Van Cuylenberg on the Raising Teens podcast. I don't think he needs much introduction, but if you don't know a lot about Hugh, his work in education has been over 15 years. He's taught in both primary and secondary in a range of educational settings. Hugh says the highlight of his teaching career was the year he spent in the far north of India volunteering and living at an underprivileged school in the Himalayas. It was there that he discovered resilience in its purest form. Inspired by his experience, Hugh returned to Melbourne and commenced working on his own program for schools. The Resilience Project was born, and having completed his postgraduate studies looking at resilience and well-being, Hugh has developed and facilitated programs for over 900 schools Australia-wide. In 2015, the National Rugby League asked Hugh to run workshops at every club in the competition. And since then, he has worked with the Australian cricket team, the Australian netball team, the Australian women's soccer team, the Jillaroos, and 10 AFL teams. Beyond the team environment, Hugh has been lucky enough to work one-on-one with individuals such as Steve Smith, Dustin Martin, and Billy Slater. He currently works closely with the Port Adelaide Football Club. In addition to his work in schools and elite sport, Hugh has presented to over 500 corporate groups as a keynote speaker and developed comprehensive programs for a range of workplaces across different sectors. Hugh is best-selling author and co-host of the popular podcast, The Imperfects. Hello, Hugh. Welcome to Raising Teens.
Colin, it's great to be here. Just the word teens makes me nervous. My kids are 7, 4 and 2, and I'm already scared. I'm already scared about the teen years, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, if I can encourage you, I often say to parents, they often look at me with like deer in headlights when you say teens, and it's challenging in the same way as it is challenging when they're 2 and 4 and 6, but it comes with other stuff. But if you are engaged with your kids and you do all the stuff on the Resilience Project, that all comes out and you see it just pay forward when you have teenagers. So you will be absolutely fine.
Well, so we moved into the house we live in 6 years ago, and our next door neighbour's got 3 kids, and the eldest was 12 when we moved in. She's now 18. It feels like just yesterday since we moved in. You can imagine my horror when I saw her walking home with her boyfriend the other day holding hands. I just thought, how am I going to deal with this well, my daughter's 4, or when my son brings home a girlfriend. I'm like, this is just a whole new world I am not equipped to deal with as of yet.
Haven't you seen those memes where the dad looks at their daughter and she's 16, but you see her as a 3-year-old holding this big brute's hand walking down the street? I think that's what you're kind of afraid of at that stage.
I think our algorithms are very different, Colette. It hasn't brought those up for me yet, thank God.
It's probably because all my algorithms are around teens, teen mental health, teen parenting, so yeah.
And mine are about prams, cots, and bottles, so a little bit different.
So, Hugh, I often start telling my listeners a little bit about how I know a guest, if I've known a guest before or met them before. We chatted about you coming on the podcast for quite a while,
Yeah.
and then life happened with both of us, like life does, stuff happened. And I think when I emailed you, I was still doing my Masters of Child and Adolescent Mental Health, which I've just finished, woohoo.
Congratulations.
And in one of the weeks, we covered resilience, and this video popped up, and it was you in an interview with well-known TV network. And I was like, oh, I know him. And afterwards, I thought back and I realized I must have sounded really odd, sort of like someone might sound who was once in a school play with Ed Sheeran. So I kind of, and I think it's because we had spoken on the same stage at a conference.
Yes.
But that was before your book. And I know your podcast had recently started around then.
Yeah.
But your work on resilience hadn't exploded to the extent that it has now. So I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. Can you just give our listeners a little bit of an idea, especially if they haven't read your book or don't know much about you, because I have listeners in South Africa and the UK. Where did your whole idea of the Resilience Project come from?
Before I do that, I remember meeting a colleague. I remember at the conference we were speaking at, Resilient Kids, I think it was. I'd never spoken at one of those conferences before, so I didn't quite know what to expect. And I remember you spoke before me, and I was watching you, and I had to stop watching. So like, this is making me feel really nervous because you're very, very good. And I thought the bar has this is a very hard bar for me to try and step over here. So I might stop listening because as much as I thought the content was wonderful, it was a bit too good for me at that time. And I thought, well, I don't want to hear this right now. It's
Thank you, Hugh. What a nice thing to say.
But to come into your question, South African listeners, I don't think I've got many South African fans. So I guess I'll start by saying I'm a very big Dale Steyn fan. He's probably my favourite bowler of all time.
Yep, just so our listeners know, you were a big cricketer whole life. And my dad, if my dad's listening to this, he will love you because his life consisted of cricket. So Saturday cricket, Sunday cricket. The story goes that I was taken from the nursing home straight to the cricket ground after my mum gave birth.
A man after my own heart.
There you go.
That sounds like a very good way to do it. Yes, to your father, if you're wondering, I was a left-arm fast opening bowler, and then every year I got slower and slower to the point I decided it was probably time to stop when I had No, I won't go into the story. It's a long story, but and to your English, to your UK supporter base, I don't like any of your cricketers. I have no time for the English cricket team. So to get to your question, so the Resilience Project and the book and the podcast, it all started a very, very long time ago. I mean, the Resilience Project started in 2012 officially, but for me, back in 2001 is when it probably all started. I think I have a very strong memory of, I was 21 years old, my sister was 18, my brother was 15. We had an incredibly happy childhood. And when my sister was 14, she was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. And it was, anyone who is close to someone with a mental illness, including eating disorders, you'll know they're just so devastating and they ravage the individual and everyone involved. And when my sister was 18, she was admitted to hospital for the first time in her journey. She dropped below crisis weight. And that was I remember coming home from hospital that night, and I was sitting at the dinner table and my dad was doing the washing up, and I asked him a question he didn't answer. So I turned around just to see why he didn't answer me. And I'll never forget the silhouette of my dad hunched over the kitchen sink in tears. I'd never seen Dad, I'd seen Dad cry once before when our dog died when I was 5 or 6 years old, but I hadn't seen him cry since that point. And I think people will know that feeling of when you see your parents cry, it's the memory of your parents crying. You kind of, they're the ones who you feel like are keeping you safe, or they're your protectors, and then when you feel like they're not coping, it's a very unnerving or very unsettling feeling. Having said that, my kids see me cry all the time, so it won't be the case for them. They're probably a bit sick of it. But I remember for me at that point, that's when I became fascinated with the question, what is it that makes people happy? Not because I wanted to fix my sister. I knew that was well beyond my expertise, but I was fascinated in how I could help Mum and Dad to feel happy again, because I hated seeing them unhappy. And my little brother Josh, who I now do the podcast with, I hated seeing him unhappy. And so I guess that was the point that I really became fascinated with the question, what is it makes us happy. And I went into primary school teaching off the back of that because it just fascinated me from an education point of view. Similar to you, did my master's looking at mental health in schools and school programs. And when I was 28 years old, I ended up volunteering in the far north of India in a village. It was meant to be 2 weeks, turned into 3.5 months. And with 3.5 months living in this, well, I remember saying to the principal on my first day, so I didn't mean 2 weeks, I meant 2 nights, because when I got there, no running water, no electricity, no beds, everyone sleeps on a dirt floor. And I thought, I actually can't, I'm not capable of surviving this. There's no way I'll be able to do it. But my next day was the first day in the school, and it's a day I'll never forget, because after 20 minutes with these kids who are sitting on a dirt floor, no tables, no chairs, in grotty, very dirty school uniforms, and most of them didn't have shoes, I just remember thinking, I've never in my life seen joy like this before. These kids are so unbelievably happy. And I couldn't help but think about my sister, who grew up we had a nice family, a beautiful family, nice enough home, went to good schools. I mean, we had everything we ever wanted growing up in my life, but my sister was to succumb to mental ill health. And I thought, I think I need to stay here. I need to work out what is it these people do every day that helps them to be so happy, because I think we're missing something back home. Anyway, I ended up living there for 3.5 months, came back to Australia, and took me a few years, but ended up setting up the Resilience Project. And the Resilience Project essentially was what I'd learnt off these people, coupled with what I'd learnt from doing my postgrad studies and my experience in schools. And it was a very slow process, but I was working with 2 schools a year for the first 3 or 4 years. No one was very interested in, and we're now very blessed to be working with, I think it's to partner with 1,100 schools as their wellbeing program, their wellbeing provider, with curriculum and TV shows for the kids on resilience, all that kind of stuff. So anyhow, it's this is a very long answer to your question, Colette. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. I love hearing where it's come from and where it is now. Also, because I follow you on Instagram, I know your baby, the Resilience Project, is almost 15, you said. And
yes.
Because it's almost 15, you have allowed the Resilience Project to get Instagram. So that's a very responsible thing to do as a parent, wait until they're a teen. So I think you're actually going to be really great being a teen parent, because you've done really well with the Resilience Project Instagram account. So if people don't know that you have an Instagram account with the Resilience Project, they must also go and jump on there. What does you've mentioned your work in schools, but I know you do lots and lots of work with sporting organisations, and you also travel the country doing teaching seminars. What does your week look like at the moment?
It's a very interesting question. It changes a lot throughout the year. My wife and I were first dating. I said to her, I loved the idea of being a stay-at-home dad. I said, I'd love to be a stay-at-home dad, and you have a career and I'll do all the parenting. Because I remember when I was in New York when I was 30 and single, but I didn't have kids. And I saw a dad at a park under the Brooklyn Bridge, and he had 2 twins crawling all over him, and he was just lying in the sun. He had music playing and he had snacks for them, and I thought, that looks amazing. I would love to. And I went and told him how great it looks, and he said, yeah, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And it was a very short conversation, and then I left. But I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. So
that was the dream.
Yeah, so I told Penny that when we were first dating, and as someone who is fiercely intelligent and very career-driven, she got very excited about that, and that was kind of our deal. And then the Resilience Project just completely blew up. We had kids, and then I started the podcast, and the podcast got much bigger than I ever expected it to very quickly. And all of a sudden, there was so much work on for me, and Penny found herself at home with the kids, and that's not what she had signed up for, and it was causing her a great deal of, resentment, I think she would be comfortable in using the word resentment. But the goalposts had changed for me a lot, because parenting is not turning up to a park with 2 perfectly behaved kids who crawl over you in the sunshine. It's so far from it. We've had all types of issues, a whole range of issues throughout. One of the biggest ones being that the eldest 2 still at 7 and 4 don't sleep properly. They still wake up 2 or 3 times a night. But a whole lot of other stuff that I won't go into now, but it just wasn't. I just wish that man said, oh, just so you know, it wasn't easy getting here. Like I couldn't find their shoes, and then one of them needed to go to the toilet just as we were leaving, and then I forgot one of their jumpers, and then the other one, I just wish he'd been a bit more honest with his experience. And so Penny and I had a long chat about it, and she said, I don't want to stop you doing the podcast and the Resilience Projects. I know how unbelievably happy it makes you, and I know how many people it's helping, but it's not good for me because my career has just come to a grinding halt. So I said, look, I'm going to. So we started this a couple of years ago. My Mondays and Fridays, I'm at home with the kids. It's my job to do everything around the house.
Incredible.
And I work on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. And with the Resilience Project, it's more I do the big events. So I'll do the teacher seminars, I'll do online webinars, I'll go to the staff meetings once a month, and I'll do the advisory board meetings. We've got an incredible team I think there's 36 of them now, and they're all wonderful, wonderful people. They're so good at their job. And so I don't have to do as much as I used to. The podcast, however, we're doing 2 episodes a week at the moment. So the podcast, my week looks like, and I realise I'm very privileged being able to say this, but my week is Mondays to Fridays I'm at home with the kids, Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. With the lack of sleep that I get and some of the stuff we're dealing with at home, it's very hard to turn up to the studio, put the headphones on at 9 a.m. and just start recording, especially when we talk about vulnerable stuff all the time. And so I said to the team, I'm finding it very hard to just step into a vulnerable place at 9 a.m. School drop-offs are incredibly challenging for us, with one of our kids being very unsettled going to school. And so I will do school drop-off, or Penny will do school drop-off, and then I go to the athletics track or the gym and I'll exercise for an hour, and then I'll go to the studio and we'll start recording because I need to exercise before I start. So, and some people might say, why don't we exercise before the kids get up? Because the reason I don't do that is because one of them wakes up at 5.
Yeah,
so
and you have to be exercising at 3 a.m. then, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah, totally. So, and some people say, we'll go to bed earlier, but then I don't get any quality time with Penny. So I just don't really want to do that. So, and then I've got commitments that'll pop up every now and again with the Queensland Maroons football team, the State of Origin team. I've got commitments with other different organisations that I'll do stuff with occasionally. But that's pretty much my week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays podcast from 10 till 4, 10 to 5, basically.
I think I remember your interview with Penny on this topic that's very empowering for married people to hear. I mean, I want to encourage people to have a listen to that episode if they haven't heard it, because you sometimes forget that as a woman you can and do have these desires to do something outside of your family and your children. And also that if you're in a position, and I'm aware some of my listeners may not be, but for some of the men to perhaps do part of their week slightly differently, and that is an immense privilege if you can do it. But yeah, it's that whole juggle of your dreams before you got married. My husband and I will have been married for 30 years this year.
Wow.
And I'm proud of that. I really am. And I'm proud because it hasn't been simple and, a walk in the park all of the 30 years. And there's been wonderful highs and then times that have been incredibly hard. And you have to have those really hard conversations and look at some of the things you had thought or you had dreamed of that have changed, and they will change. And, almost going back to what you said in the beginning with being worried about having a teen, as parents or as adults, when you go into a marriage, things change at every single stage. When you have children and your children might have difficulties that you never expected, or they become teenagers and something else comes up in their teen years. And my husband and I are talking and juggling with different things now. We've got 2 of ours are young adults, and that brings another whole set of stuff we hadn't expected. So, I love that's going back to your podcast episode with Penny about how you were vulnerable with each other on there openly for everyone. It's good to do.
I think that was called the elephant in the relationship.
That's it, the elephant. I knew it was elephant something.
Elephant something.
A play on the elephant in the room, but that was the name of it, yes.
Yeah, and it was because that was the issue, but then it also brought up something else which Penny and I talked about in the podcast episode, and it resonated so well with us, or so much with Australians. I believe it was the most shared episode of any podcast in Australia that year, or last year it was, and we talked about the mental load, basically. Yes. So the fact that Penny there's a lot of resentment around housework and due to chores. And I was thinking, I can't do any more than I'm currently doing because I get up, when the kids get up, I get their breakfast, I help get them ready for school. And then when I get home from work, I help with dinner, I help put them to bed, and then I clean up afterwards. I actually don't have capacity to do more. And she said, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the mental load. She said, I am always making lists. I have to work out when the kids need to go to the dentist. I'm working out when I need to enrol them in school. I'm working out when they need new clothes, new shoes. That's all the stuff that I carry that you don't see that I do.
Yeah.
And she bought these cards called Fair Play cards, which outlays all the jobs, visible and invisible. And we basically divided them up on the podcast, and we worked out who was going to do what. And it was an amazing experience because we had all types of, from a lot of females, we had some incredible responses. But some of my mates were messaging me saying, I'm just starting to listen to your episode on the mental load. I feel like I'm walking into a trap here. What is this? But it's not about making the male do more.
No.
It's about helping your best mate out, and it's about being more organised in your relationship. And it's been great for us.
Yeah, and I think that's what I loved about that episode was just talking about that mental load, because it's funny, my husband and I, we always talk about, we've had this thing about dividing up the jobs since we were married to now. It's still our thing where we will, when we have a bit of a niggle or an argument, it's usually that. And it often comes down for me to that mental load. And I know this is a podcast on teens, raising teens, but for parents who are raising teenagers, very often it is the woman who does carry that mental load. And I know even with my teenagers and my young adult children, I am thinking, my son said something about doing his CV. I mustn't forget that I need to check on that with him this evening. And then my daughter's filling out forms to do exchange in America. Oh, I have to check, has she gone for that interview, or, has she applied for the interview? And then, there's parent-teacher night for my son who's 16. And I love that Penny called those out, and I think I need a pack of those cards. But I think after 30 years of being married to my husband, he and I have been able to have those conversations about mental load, and, he's supportive of me, and I'm supportive in areas that I didn't realize that he needed. So I think that's a really important part of our relationship. As a parent, has your idea of resilience, or the way you think about resilience, has that changed then for you over the years?
Enormously, yeah. When I used to do talks, I used to go and do parent talks before I was a parent.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to apologise to every parent who came to see me speak before I was a parent, because I knew it'd be hard, but I didn't understand how incredibly challenging it is.
Yeah.
There is a whole host of stuff that we now deal with as a couple, as a family, that I never envisaged us around neurodiversity, that I never really envisaged us. I didn't think that'd be our story and our journey, but it is. And it's required all of my resilience and all of my, I feel like a lot of the time it's like I'm just trying to cope. I'm just coping. I'm just getting by. And I know Penny's the same. So when we first had kids, people will often ask me in interviews, what do you want most for your kids? And for the first, I would say 6 months, I was saying, I just want them to be happy. That's all I want for my kids. I don't care what they just want to be happy. But that kind of changed after a while, because I realised that's just not really realistic. Like, they're not always going to be happy. Like, even after 6 months, I can tell it's so unrealistic an expectation. No one's always happy. And I realised what I wanted from them more than anything was just when something goes wrong for them, they know how to deal with it. They know how to cope, and they know there are things they can do that will help get them through a really tough time. So I guess what I was trying to say was I realised I just want them to be resilient, or at least have the skills and the tools and all that kind of stuff when stuff goes wrong, that they can hopefully navigate their way through whatever it is they're going through. That's what I want for my kids. I want them to experience life's up and downs. I want them to have hardship. I think it's part of the human experience. It makes the highs so much higher. You mentioned before the relationship, the lows, help the light shine brighter when it's shining, all that kind of stuff. So I would love them to know. I think the way my views changed on resilience is they're really important. It's a skill, and it's important to understand it. So for not if, but when you need it.
Yeah. And I think for me, I don't like watching my children go through hardship. It's one of the most painful things in my parenting. I do not like it, enjoy it. I wish I could take it away. I wish I could bubble wrap them. The problem is that if I do that, then they won't become resilient. They won't develop resilience. And it's the hard thing is standing watching your children go through some tough stuff that builds resilience. And also, I often say to parents, I know you often speak about mental ill health. And so I say to parents, just because your child struggles with their mental health does not mean they are not resilient. Some of the most resilient people I know still work on their mental health every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
And so it's not about having this happy fairy dust kind of life for our children. I mean, I do want my children to have times where they experience immense joy and pleasure and wonder, but life isn't like that all of the time. And so I also say often on the podcast, what do you want for your child's future adult? And please don't tell me I just want my child to be happy because life is so much richer than just happiness.
Totally.
And so I love a lot of the stuff that comes out of the Resilience Project, particularly the core of the Resilience Project to me is your whole idea on gem thoughts.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit? What are gem thoughts for people who haven't heard that before? I know it's backed by research and all of your experience. Why is that so important to resilience?
Well, I guess to go back to when I was in India, what I noticed with these people, having lived with them for 3.5 months, was there were 3 things that really stood out as far as they stood out on their own, but also the discrepancy between what we do here in a country like Australia compared to these people. These people practice gratitude, they practiced empathy, and they practiced mindfulness every single day. Because of that, they were so incredibly grateful for everything they had, despite the fact they had very little to call their own or nothing we would consider valuable. They were so empathetic, and because of that, they were so kind to each other, so compassionate to each other. They were always there for each other. You don't walk past, in this village, you don't walk past someone and just say hi. You stop, and if you walk past, it takes a long time to get anywhere, but you stop and you talk to someone. And I couldn't speak the language, they didn't speak English. And so we would just stand there. They'd often just hold my hand and say Julie and pat my shoulder. Julie is how you'd say hello. They'd pat my shoulder for a long time. So I'd finish that, go to the next person. But they were so deeply empathetic and so caring towards each other. They did a lot of meditation, like a lot of meditation. And because of that, they were so incredibly good at just being wherever they were. Like when you were with them, there was nothing else happening in the world for them. It was whatever was happening in that moment, that they were there for it. They weren't distracted. They weren't checking their phones because they didn't have phones. They were there. And when I go back to Australia, I wanted to go and start talking about gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. But I knew I couldn't turn up to schools and just say, oh, I saw kids in India do this, you should do it, or your school should do it. So that's when I went back to uni and I saw the research. There was decades and decades of research screaming at us. If we want to feel happier, if we want to improve our mental health, or we want to cope better in a challenging time, we've got to start practicing these 3 things. So, yeah, gratitude, the ability to pay attention to what you've got, not worry about what you don't have, which we do struggle with a lot, and the hedonistic treadmill or the if and then model of happiness, where we will say, if I buy this car, then I'll feel happy. You buy that car, feel happy for a couple of months, and you see a better car. Actually, I need to have that car. Get a promotion, feels great, so happy now. I've got this promotion, it's all I've ever wanted. It's my dream job. A year later, a better job comes up. Actually, I want to see if I can get that job. If I get that job, then I'll be happy. We find it very hard to just be grateful for what's happening as it's happening. Empathy, when you feel what someone else feels, put yourself in someone else's shoes, and mindfulness, the ability to be wherever you are. They're the things that these people, I know they were such, to me, very simple. I mean, they're not, but they are 3 concepts that primary school kids in particular get it instantly.
Yeah.
And I don't say to the kids, this is what gratitude is. We just tell them stories, and implicitly they understand what you're talking about. And that's why they become the 3 things that the Resilience Project primarily does when they work with anyone, any school, organisation or sporting club.
And so for your daily gem thoughts as a parent, what does that look like to you? You've kind of spoken a little bit about going to the gym and so on, particularly when you have really challenging days or challenging mornings with drop-off. What does gem look like for you, Hugh, in a week?
We have these journals that we've come up with. It's a 6-month or a 21-day journal, and there are questions every single day centred around gratitude, empathy and mindfulness that you answer, and they're really great. And I finished a couple. I did quite a few of them, and then I realised after a while it just become a part of my daily habits. So when I'm with the kids at the dinner table, one of the questions, well, no, we've developed these cards, these conversation cards, and there are a pack of cards. There's 20 GEM questions, 20 gratitude, 20 empathy, 20 mindfulness. And as the family, we draw a question, we answer the question. Our family is not one of those families that sits around the dinner table having a nice meal. It's utter chaos and mayhem, and it's always distressed me because I'm like, this is not what I thought parenting would be like. We never get everyone around the dinner table at the same time. There's so much yelling and screaming and food flying everywhere and meltdowns. But when I brought the GEM cards home and the kids would answer, the question might be, what's the best thing that happened to you today? Or who's someone who made you smile today? Or what is there something kind you did for someone else? Or a mindfulness question might be, what's something in the house that you've just seen right now that you've never noticed before? And we go through these cards and they love it. Like, they really love doing it. So it feels quite nice that the kids are, enjoying these cards. I didn't even know we'd done them. I didn't know they existed.
And so you don't do that as part of dinner? You just do it as another activity?
No, as part of dinner. I do those cards as part of dinner. And that's what I've noticed. We're now getting, the kids will sit still for 10 minutes while we do the cards.
Fantastic.
And they love it.
Go to the win page on hope1032.com.au to win a copy of the Resilience Project's GEM Conversation Cards. And if you would like to purchase some of the Resilience Project's GEM Conversation Cards, please head to the show notes and you will find a link to the website. I'm so grateful that you're honest about the dinner times, because in my book I speak about the research behind family dinners and so on, but I'm also very clear to say I have found family dinners stressful for most of my parenting because it isn't like you see in the movies, everyone, politely passing the chicken and the veggies and, everybody waiting their turn to chat. It's usually some child nudging another and taking something off another child's plate, and there's a meltdown, or someone doesn't like the food that was cooked. And you end up feeling like incredibly stressed by the end of dinner time, and it plays out differently at different ages. And we also used to, we still do when we have all the kids around, the whole what is one good thing, what is one not so good thing, and what is one interesting thing that has happened in your day. And I also found that gave them something to think of other than, poking their sister in the ribs or whatever. And it really brought the conversation back to being interested in each other, and they learn to wait their turn to listen, and they can't wait to share. But I love the fact that you have cards, because that actually really changes it up every night, and they won't always know what they're getting. Yeah. And even that 10 minutes is meaningful. And then everyone can go off and go crazy in their own direction. But that's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about like the experience of dinner time, because my memory as kids is we would sit at the table and we would never leave until we were told we could leave. And Mum would always have these beautiful dinners with salads and meats and everything just laid out, and drinks, and then dessert would come out. That's what we had most nights. It was quite extraordinary. Yeah. And it's one of the times I do feel like a failure in my life is at dinner time, because the kids are all eating different things because they hate everything. Yep. And then often, like, Penny will get home and she'll say, "What's my dinner?" And I'll go, "I didn't even make your dinner. I'm sorry. I'm just having a piece of steak with nothing else."
Yeah, and there's a few carrot sticks there from the kids if you want to eat. I just chopped up a few because that's what they felt like today. Yeah, and then and I bought a pack of 10 carrots, but next week they're going to hate it. So
So that's what I think back to my children and go, I just feel like this is an area I'm definitely failing at. Like, it's mayhem, but the cards have given us 10 minutes where we talk about GEM, which is great.
And I think your kids, even once they get into teenage years, I still think those will come out, because it was still something my kids valued even into their teen years, and even occasionally now in their young adults when we do it. It's just part of who we were and who we are, even if it's that 2 or 3 minutes. And even if it doesn't go smoothly every week, it happens once a week. That's perfect. You also made me think a little bit about families with neurodivergent kids. That's also very much part of my own personal experience. So it looks very different for families where you might have different neurodivergent children and adults sitting at your dinner table. It's going to look very different to what the books or the movies show about family meals. I think that's where we need to put down our guilt, because we are doing the best with what we have and what we can now. And in our 10 minutes, that's the best that we can. And that is what our children will remember, even our teenagers.
Totally agree.
And so finally, Hugh, the question I ask all parents at the end of my seminar, what is your biggest hope for young people today?
That they can live out their teenage years not a slave to their device. So a very dear friend of mine, Michael Whipley, who is from Fitzy, Kate and Whipper, the radio show in Sydney, he has come up with a thing called 36 months, and he's trying to get it legislated that it is illegal for kids to be on social media until they're 16. And he's called it 36 months because it's to give them back 36 months of their lives. And I love it so much because the best memories I have of childhood would not have happened if I had a device. The things that brought me the most joy as a teenager would not have occurred if I had a smartphone with me the whole time. I think my mental health would have been, I've never had issues in mental health. I would have struggled massively if social media was around that time. So how on earth it's not illegal already, I don't know. I know there are countries around the world who are trying very hard to, I know in Texas that they're pretty close to legislating that kids are not allowed on social media until they're 16. Or maybe it's not allowed smartphones, I can't remember, but Whipper's doing some incredible work to try and give teenagers those 36 months of their life back. So what I would love more than anything is for Whipper to get his way and for it to be legislated that social media is illegal to the age of 16.
Amazing. Thank you, Hugh. It's been such an honour to have you on the podcast. Thank you for your time.
No, it's a pleasure. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do. I've have been following you since we first met. When was that? Like 2014, maybe?
It would have been 2000. No, it
later than that?
It would have been 2019, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it would have been 2019, I think. Okay. So, yeah.
Right, okay, I'm off by about 5 years. That's what happens when you have young kids. It completely distorts everything, including your concept of time.
You know why? I remember because you had a picture of your eldest in the seminar.
Yes, I had a picture of, that's right. There's a video of Benji sucking my nose, as I remember correctly.
Yep, that's exactly the one. I wasn't going to say that, but that was the one.
That's exactly what it was. So, and I've just been following you ever since, and I think it's just teenage years, I feel very strongly that they are the most difficult years of our lives. I feel like it's certainly the time where we feel most insecure and when we feel most unsure of ourselves and we're most vulnerable to negative influences. Yeah. And so to have a resource like this for parents to help them navigate, I just think is so vital and so incredible. So I commend you for everything that you're doing, Colette. I think it's incredibly important work.
Thanks, Hugh. I think my heart behind this was that parents could have an expert in their pocket and just pull it out. And there's so many people doing such brilliant work that I felt like I wanted parents to have that hour that could just pull something out while they're in the car and they have an expert who can give them some advice. So thank you for being part of that whole network.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Colette.
It's so hard to decide or pick what I appreciated the most in this chat with Hugh, but I think it was his reminder that as adults, we need to work on our own well-being and how GEM thoughts are part of this. So I think in my mini episode next week, I'm going to unpack some of the research into GEM thoughts. Remember, GEM is gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. And I'm going to think out loud about some of the practical ways we could help our teens in these 3 areas. So if you found this episode helpful or gained some useful insight from it, please subscribe and review wherever you get your podcasts and consider sharing it with friends and family or schools. I hope to see you next episode where I'm going to chat more about GEM thoughts. But in the meantime, keep parenting with your teens' future adults in mind.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.